Number 5 on this list is Atlantis Marine Park. We are headed all the way down under for this one because Atlantis Marine Park is actually in Australia. AustralianNews.com writes, Atlantis Marine Park was initially a huge success with families from WA and beyond flocking to the park to watch the live dolphin shows, swim in the pools, ride pedal boats, and have their obligatory photo with King Neptune, a huge statue at the entrance to the park. However, in 1990, just 9 years after opening, Atlantis shut its doors. Western Australia's boom never eventuated, and the 1987 stock market crash put a halt to prosperity. Atlantis closed due to financial difficulty and was left abandoned. It has since been damaged by vandals and has become overgrown and derelict. Old statues can still be found scattered throughout the grounds, as well as broken walls and concrete pools. For years, it was no man's land, popular with dog walkers. However, just last month, the iconic King Neptune was restored to his former glory after a petition by locals who started an online campaign for something to be done with the ruins. Well, I'm glad to see that Neptune is looking fresh again, but I don't know how long he'll stay that way. Apparently, this place, when the sun goes down, is home to some evil creatures. Four-legged mutant things with glowing red eyes that hiss and are nothing that we know of from this world. Now, this could be a bunch of baloney, but that's what some people have reported seeing when they've explored this place at night. Probably safe to go during the daytime, just make sure you set an alarm for 6 p.m. to get out of there if you do go. Number 4 on this list is Crinkly Bottom Theme Park. This one, to my understanding, has been demolished, but it still deserves a spot on this list because of how creepy it was when it was around. Mr. Blobby was a TV caricature in the early 1990s. He was featured on one of Britain's most successful late-night Saturday television shows and was this big pink blob creature with a bow tie on. This was a comedy television show, and this blob thing didn't lack any of that. He would often engage in annoying antics with celebrity guests and become a bit of a British television phenomenon. Well, Mr. Blobby was successful enough that he of course needed toys, merchandise, and heck, while we're at it, let's give him his own amusement park. Sometimes what works well on TV doesn't always translate to a fun amusement park though. Crinkly Bottom was what they called it, and it opened up in 1994. This annoying sidekick's popularity didn't last forever though, and this amusement park's life was very short-lived. The place shut down in 1996 because it simply was not making enough money. Then it faded away into obscurity and everybody forgot about this interesting little business venture. That was until 2009 though, when some urban explorers stumbled upon it again. The once bright and beautiful blobby land looked like something straight out of a horror film. It was worn and gross and just reeked of evil. Animals had taken up residence there, and based on how the place looked, it wouldn't have been surprising if some sketchy characters once did business there too. You can't visit it now because it's demolished, but you really shouldn't have been going when it was around anyways. Number 3 on this list is Boblo Island. I had to include Boblo Island on this list to give a bit of a shout out to Ontario, where your boy grew up. Boblo Island was wildly successful for a time and operated for nearly a century. As with a lot of places on this list though, it couldn't seem to power through the 90s and had to shut down. Reader's Digest says, picture an 1898 Victorian amusement park, music from an organ grinder, women's skirts swishing around the dance hall, children's laughter echoing from various newfangled rides. That's what this theme park on Boys Blank Island, nicknamed Boblo, near Detroit on the Canadian side of the Detroit River, was to residents alike. Its doors were shut nearly 100 years later in 1993, and the area is now closed to the public. But you can boat or kayak by the remains, listening for the ghostly sounds of long past visitors. While you can't stay here overnight, you can rent these 8 haunted places on Airbnb. Being on an island really adds to the creepiness for me, I think. Like this place, from all the pictures I could find, it really looks totally detached from all other society. Basically meaning that whatever happens here, you are totally by yourself. Like there is a new set of rules for this island. There have been stories that something lurks here, a spirit or something dark. Be very careful if you ever go to Boblo Island. Number 2 on this list is Pripyat Amusement Park. Pripyat is a town that we've talked a lot about on this channel already. In fact, it was recently featured in a video where we looked at the top 5 mysterious towns that are completely abandoned. Pripyat is a ghost town in northern Ukraine and near the Ukrainian and Belarus border. It was named after the nearby river Pripyat and was founded in 1970. Right in the town is a small amusement park that once looked quite fun and had plans to grow into a big big Ukrainian park that people might flock to. Those dreams were never realized though, and now it sits in complete and utter disarray. Those dreams were never realized because of the horrible accident that occurred in 1986. You see, the town of Pripyat was basically established to serve the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. When it was first built, it was a closed town basically only for the workers of this place, but it grew and grew as time went on, and at its height had a population of just under 50,000 people. I don't need to go into too much detail about the accident as a whole, because I imagine that you guys are all pretty aware. But basically, this was the worst accident of this nature in human history, and for all our sakes, we need to hope that it never happens again. The radiation damage was absolutely massive, and right after it happened, the entire town of Pripyat had to be evacuated. That, of course, has left the amusement park, right in the middle of this town, completely abandoned as well. Not a lot of people have gone to this town or park since this incident occurred. For a long time, it wasn't safe to set foot within a set radius of the blast. Those who have been brave or foolish enough to set foot into this town and explore the amusement park have reported some strange and scary findings. Rumor has it that some sort of entity lives there. Something dark and evil calling this abandoned place home. A nasty and sinister entity that doesn't like to be disturbed. There have been talks of this being some type of shadow creature or potentially a beast like a werewolf of sorts. Either way, the people who visit this place feel an overwhelming sense of dread when they're there. They also feel as if they're unwelcome, like they entered somebody's home who doesn't want them there. There are multiple reasons why this amusement park is abandoned, so I'd stay away if I was you. And finally, number 1 on this list is Six Flags. Now, I don't mean Six Flags as a chain or anything like that. There's 23 different Six Flags in the United States, and not all of them are haunted. One in particular, though, is currently out of commission, abandoned, and definitely a spot you shouldn't go to. All the Rooms writes, this Six Flags fell out of business following serious damage from Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The park opened in 2000 and was only operating for a few years before suffering significantly during the hurricane, which displaced 20,000 people and killed nearly 2,000 people. The park closed after Hurricane Katrina, and there wasn't enough funding for repairs, so it fell into further decay over the last few years. To this day, there's still an eerie sign at the entrance to the park that says closed for the storm. It's an apocalyptic site which has been taken advantage of by Hollywood and used for films such as Jurassic World and Dawn of Planet of the Apes. These filmmakers are way braver than I would be, because I would not want to be setting foot on those grounds. The people who have been here all seem to think that something paranormal is going on. Phantom noises echoing throughout the park and other random bodiless sounds are heard all the time. Similarly to a lot of the other things on this list, there is a massive overhanging feeling of dread. The air is thick with it, and you can almost taste the discomfort. No one has reported being attacked here, but it seems like that's only a matter of time if people keep going. The mayor of New Orleans is currently looking at demolishing this park, which, in my opinion, probably for the best.
Number 5. Whittingham Hospital, England. Whittingham Hospital, located in England, is notorious for its spine-chilling reputation as one of the most haunted places within the United Kingdom. This branching psychiatric facility was originally founded in 1869 as the Whittingham Asylum. The hospital is riddled with a long and dark history that continues to intrigue the curious minds of paranormal enthusiasts, dark tourists, and even just casual onlookers. The hospital was meant to be a place of hope, where those suffering from mental illnesses could seek treatment and solace. But over the years, Whittingham Hospital's reputation took a dark turn. Substantiated claims of overcrowding, inadequate care, and the mistreatment of struggling patients began to surface, casting a dark shadow over the institution. As the hospital's population inflated, the claims and stories of its dark side only grew. One of the most haunting aspects of Whittingham Hospital comes from its now abandoned state. The facility officially closed its doors in 1995. The large complex consists of many interconnected buildings, all of which are said to be riddled with bouts of paranormal activity. It's not uncommon for curious visitors to report odd encounters, strange noises, and unexplained phenomena within the hospital's halls. One of the most famous ghostly entities said to roam the hospital is that of a nurse known as Nurse Edith. According to legend, Nurse Edith was deeply committed to her patients and worked tirelessly during her time at Whittingham. Some believe that her spirit lingers in the hospital, continuing to care for the patients patients who suffered there, even in their afterlives. Aw, that's kind of sweet. Visitors have reported hearing the sound of airy footsteps and the rustling of a nurse's uniform, even though the building is completely void of the living. Another ghost associated with Whittingham Hospital is the Lady in White, and guys, I'm starting to think that this Lady in White is actually just everywhere, because I swear to the heavens almighty that she has appeared in every single ghost video I've done. Is she like a ghost celebrity? Is she going on a world tour? Are people just really not creative and the only name they can think of is the lady and a vague descriptive feature? What would I be called? The lady with curls? Sorry, anyway. The Lady in White. This Lady in White is described as a spectral woman dressed in a flowing white gown. Well, I would assume so. She's often seen wandering the hospital's halls, her presence accompanied by an eerie chill and an overwhelming sense of dread. Some speculate that she may have been a former patient or a nurse from this hospital's dark past. What nurse was going to work in a long, flowy dress? The hospital's small chapel is another location that is thought to be haunted. It's always the chapel, isn't it? Witnesses have reported hearing faint whispers, disembodied voices, and the sound of organ music emanating from the chapel, even though it hasn't been used for decades. Well, not by the living at least. The atmosphere in this abandoned place is incredibly uncomfortable and haunting. It's not surprising in the slightest that many believe the spirits of the past still linger within its walls. Number 4. Essex County Hospital. Essex County Hospital is a medical facility in the heart of Essex County, but it has definitely gained popularity for more than just its dark medical practices. This now abandoned hospital has become the subject of numerous ghost stories and paranormal legends, earning it a reputation as one of the most haunted asylums in the region. The hospital's strange history began in the late 1800s when it was first founded as a state-of-the-art mental health institution. Over the years, it grew to care for a wide range of patients, from the mentally ill to those with severe physical medical conditions. However, it is the alleged treatment of the mentally ill patients that left a sinister imprint on this building's hallowed halls. Many claims of paranormal sightings in Essex County Hospital revolve around the abandoned psychiatric wards. Former staff members and visitors claim to hear disembodied voices, eerie whispers, and the sounds of footsteps echoing boldly through the empty hallways. Some witnesses have even reported shadowy figures moving about, only to vanish into thin air when approached. These strange entities are thought to be tormented souls, leading some to believe that the hospital's troubled history has left broken, lingering spirits behind. One of the most chilling stories surrounds a former nurse who is said to still roam the hospital's near-empty corridors. It's said that she was driven to madness by the relentless demands of her job and eventually took her own life during one of her regular shifts. Visitors and paranormal investigators have even reported encountering her ghostly figure, dressed in an old nurse's uniform, wandering aimlessly and emitting an energy plagued by sorrow. The morgue of the hospital is another area where paranormal activity is frequently reported. Witnesses have claimed to hear strange, unexplained noises and have also felt sudden drops in temperatures. Some have even reported seeing figures of patients who passed away within the hospital's walls wandering around. Essex County Hospital's notoriety has attracted paranormal investigators from everywhere. Many have conducted extensive research within the building, managing to capture unexplained phenomena on audio and video recordings. Legends and ghost stories have only intensified the hospital's supernatural reputation. Residents avoid the area at night, and honestly, props to them, they're smart. Don't walk near the creepy abandoned hospital filled with scorned creatures alone at night. Night is when the bad things happen. Night is when there is definitely something chasing you as you run up the stairs after turning off the light. Skeptics often scoff at the claims of ghostly encounters, but the giant volume of reported paranormal activity can't be ignored. Whether you're a plain-minded skeptic or a curious believer in the supernatural, the stories surrounding this abandoned hospital continue to intrigue anyone who hears its unsettling story. Number 3. Danvers State Hospital. Danvers State Hospital, located in Danvers, Massachusetts, has a twisted and haunted history that has managed to capture the imaginations of paranormal enthusiasts and the curiosity of brave urban explorers. It's considered one of the most well-known and haunted asylums within the United States. Danvers State Hospital was constructed in 1874 and was originally known as the State Lunatic Hospital at Danvers. It was designed by an architect as a sprawling Kirkbride plan institution. This design was highly preferred in the 19th century due to its focus on natural light and, more importantly, patient comfort. However, over time, the hospital faced issues relating to overcrowding, underfunding, and development surrounding the knowledge and treatment of psychiatric care. Danvers State Hospital became notorious for its mistreatment of patients, overcrowding, and unsanitary conditions. Stories of neglect, harm inflicted by staff, and experimental treatments added to its disturbing reputation. The hospital's history is drowned in tragedy. Thousands of patients passed away within its walls over the years. The hospital's architecture, which features a central administration building with wings extending outward, became an iconic silhouette on the Massachusetts landscape. The hospital's ominous appearance also played a role in its association with paranormal activity. By the mid-1900s, changes in the mental health care and treatment thankfully led to the eventual abolishment of Danvers State Hospital. Hospital. It officially closed its doors in 1992, causing the property to face years of abandonment and nature claim deterioration. Danvers State Hospital's association with the paranormal began to increase dramatically during its years of abandonment. Urban explorers and ghost hunters reported strange interactions and occurrences, including unexplained noises, odd figures, and a general feeling of unease. The hospital's decaying interiors and labyrinth-like layout only further contributed to the sense of doom. In 2005, the administration building was renovated and repurposed into luxury apartments known as the residences at the Page School. However, the other wings of the hospital were demolished to make way for new things. The history and haunting even inspired a 2001 horror film called Session 9, which was set and actually partially filmed on the real hospital ground. Despite the changes to the property and the demolition of much of the hospital, Danvers State Hospital remains a symbol of the troubling history of mental health care in the US. Number 2, Old Changi Hospital, Singapore. The Old Changi Hospital, located in Singapore, is a haunting relic of the past, notorious for its eerie and unsettling history, like many others here. This abandoned medical facility with its dark past and countless paranormal encounters has become the focus of local legends and a location of paranormal fascination. The hospital was built in the early 1930s and was initially used as a military hospital for British forces. During World War II, it witnessed significant trauma and suffering while it was used as a prisoner of war camp by the Japanese. The hospital's history is tainted by atrocities committed during the Japanese occupation. Many prisoners of war, including Allied soldiers and civilians, suffered unspeakable horrors within its thick walls. Claims of torment, brutality, and death all contribute to the building's dark and unsettling presence. After the war, the Old Changi Hospital continued to serve as a medical facility, but its patients began to experience strange displays of paranormal activity. The stories of the paranormal activity soon began to spread throughout the hospital. Visitors and staff often reported hearing strange noises, disembodied voices, and witnessing oddities from another dimension. Commonly reported encounters include sightings of shadowy figures, the sounds of footsteps in empty corridors, and mysterious unexplained events. One of the most well-known stories associated with the hospital is the Lady in Red. According to the legend, a woman dressed in red is often spotted aimlessly roaming through the hospital's hallways. Some believe that she may be the spirit of a nurse from the hospital's past, forever trapped within its walls. Paranormal investigators and enthusiasts have flocked to the Old Changi Hospital to explore its haunted reputation even further, hoping that they may be fortunate enough to catch even just a glimpse of an unknown entity. Many have managed to capture audio recordings, photographs, and video footage supposedly documenting encounters with spirits or unexplained phenomena. These investigators have even further fueled the already blazing fire of this building's haunted reputation. In recent years, the Old Changi Hospital has been featured in various paranormal television shows. The Old Changi Hospital's chilling history and reported encounters with the unexplained make it an enduring and eerie landmark in Singapore. Number 1, Penhurst State School and Hospital. Penhurst State School and Hospital, found in Spring City, Pennsylvania, has a sinister history full of allegations surrounding the serious neglect and harmful mistreatment of its residents. This tragic past has given rise to numerous claims of paranormal activity, turning Penhurst into a hotspot for ghost lovers, paranormal investigators, and curious minds. Penhurst was established in 1908, initially intended to be an institution for the care and treatment of individuals with neurodivergent brains and serious mental health impairments. Because anyone who is neurodivergent back then was classified as legally insane. However, over the decades, like many others on this list, the facility became overcrowded, understaffed, and plagued by claims of inhumane treatment towards its patients. Reports of physical and psychological harm, as well as overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, created a lot of controversy and upset in the community. Not enough for them to do anything about it, but in their heads, they were very upset. The mistreatment and neglect of residents at Penhurst eventually led to its closure in 1987, after over 80 years after the doors first opened. The facility was abandoned and left to be forgotten and taken over by nature, but the stories of the cruel suffering endured by its residents did not fade. Instead, these stories contributed to the now well-known reputation that Penhurst has. One of the most known paranormal activity hotspots within Penhurst is the Mayflower Building. This building was once home to some of the institution's most vulnerable residents, who all met grisly, vicious ends. Visitors exploring the abandoned wing have reported hearing looming voices, footsteps, and the sounds of wheelchairs moving on their own. Many believe that the tormented, vengeful spirits of former residents continue to roam the Mayflower Building, unable to find true peace even in death. The Penhurst State School and Hospital is host to regular ghost tours and paranormal investigations, attracting curious individuals from all over the globe. These tours offer enthusiasts a chance to explore the decaying buildings and the chance to potentially encounter one of the restless spirits that inhabit the grounds. While skeptics argue that the stories of paranormal activity at Penhurst can be attributed to the tragic history of the the institution and the power of suggestion, many who have visited the site claim to have had inexplicable and chilling experiences.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Ground Church Tower. Take one look at this ominous tower poking out of the water and tell me it's not cursed, or filled with treasure, and the treasure's cursed. Sure, it's a church, and churches are places of peace and light, but this one has a tragic story behind it. It was once a lovely place of worship located in South Tyrol, Italy. Folks would come and participate in some pretty average church activities. However, in the 50s, major change was on the horizon. The town needed a new source of energy. In the end, they decided that building an artificial lake would be the way to go. They filled a wide expanse with water and ended up flooding the church. I suppose it was cheaper just to leave some of the buildings as they were instead of demolishing them first. The result is stunning and a little bit ominous. These days, you can see the bell tower peeking out from the top of the water. The rest of the church is down below, wallowing in the murky depths. It sort of feels like a water level in a video game with plenty to explore and frustration abound. I mean, imagine descending into the depths and wading through the many waterlogged chambers hidden below. There could be anything waiting down there. Spirits of wildlife that may have been caught up in the artificial lake, the long lingering ghosts of old churchgoers doomed to float about. It's fascinating and fear-inducing. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Sorrento Abandoned Mill, another Italian cursed building. If you ever visit Naples, you can take a day and head off the beaten path. A canyon nearby is known as the Valley of the Mills and houses all sorts of awesome structures. Ages and ages ago, a flour mill was built. For years it operated, providing flour to the surrounding regions. In fact, it apparently managed to do so for hundreds of years. And if you're at all familiar with the operation of mills before standard safety practices were introduced, you know they were death traps. So for hundreds of years, folks toiled away, grinding out flour and occasionally some workers. Uh-oh. Now, these deaths didn't mean that the mill had to close, it was seen as an occupational hazard of sorts. But then in the late 19th century, it became isolated from the sea. Tasso Square was built and this caused the mill to become less practical. Humidity rose in the area and the mill was forced to shut down. Years later, the building was ultimately closed for good. So we've got a historic mill in a valley closed due to societal progress. Sounds like a recipe for ghosts or a curse to me. If you look at it these days, you'll agree. The mill has been totally overtaken by nature. Greenery has consumed the ancient structure, giving it a foreboding and abandoned look. Moss and lichens cover pretty much every square inch of the walls, essentially daring anyone to come and explore. But be careful if you do, it's hard to tell what might be hidden among the foliage. Maybe a mill worker's ghost missing some essential limbs, or a foreman who lost everything when the grindstones stopped grinding. I hope it was worth it. Progress. Coming in at number 3, we've got the New Bedford Orpheum. Abandoned theaters are cursed as a rule. Like, name one abandoned theater that doesn't have a ghost or urban legend attached. I'll wait. They're magnets for drama, it's in their nature. And this Massachusetts-based art house has a flair for the dramatic like no other. Get this, it opened on the same day that the Titanic went down. Talk about a hot start. It operated for a few decades, showing movies and hosting cultural events. The Orpheum was a staple of local culture at the time. However, in 1958, it closed its doors. Not for good, mind you. It would still open on occasion for extra special events and was even used by a tobacco company as storage for a little while. But these days, the Orpheum is still and silent. Ghostly even. A peek inside will reveal a gigantic sprawling space complete with mezzanine, private boxes, and faded murals. The peeling paint and crumbling plaster add to the spooky ambiance. A total lack of audience for ages makes for an echoey good time too. It's everything an old theater should be, including the creepiness. It's decrepit without being condemnable, which has led the community to rally behind efforts to reopen it. However, none of these have been very successful. It seems like the curse extends out, hitting the folks who would even attempt to resurrect it. Would you take a seat in the audience, or are you scared of seeing an unscheduled show? Coming in at number 2, we've got the Sathorn Unique Building. A monument to what could have been the Sathorn Unique Building is an interesting case. What was supposed to be a luxurious, high-rise apartment building ended up being an abandoned husk. Perfect for urban explorers. Back in the 90s, a magnificent tower was planned. It was to be 47 stories tall with over 600 units housing all sorts of high rollers in Bangkok. Unfortunately, construction had to stop during the 1997 Asian financial crisis. The building itself was about 80% done, but would never be finished in its entirety. Plenty of money, materials, and man-hours were sunk with nothing to show for it. Well, almost nothing. These days, the Sathorn Unique is known as the Ghost Tower. Thrill seekers and graffiti artists love the sprawling building and have pretty much made it their own. The inside is totally filled with spray-painted murals and other forms of street art. Sure, it's dangerous to go running around in abandoned buildings, but try telling that to any of the folks who do it. Aside from the generally unsavory reputation of street art and urban exploring, why is it known as the Ghost Tower? Well, some locals believe the building was built on the site of an ancient graveyard. This unfortunate placement led to construction delays, accidents, and the eventual abandonment. This story is enough to keep anyone but the bravest out of the Ghost Tower. Another theory is that the building cast shadows on the nearby Wat Yad Nawa, an old Buddhist temple. This, while not being worthy of an outright curse, was considered to be unfavorable. Success is hard to achieve while preventing sunlight from reaching Buddhist temples. Recently, the building has achieved some sort of online fame, with many viral videos featuring folks free-running throughout the tower. This resulted in criminal charges being filed against the trespassing videographers. Is that the result of bad luck or a curse? And finally, at number 1, we've got Eastern State Penitentiary. In East Philadelphia, thrown in a cage, ghosts are coming back because they feel the rage. I'll stop there, you get the idea. At one point, this prison was among the most famous worldwide. It jailed some of America's most prolific criminals, including Al Capone, the inspiration for Scarface, and Slick Willie Sutton, the bank robber extraordinaire. Abandoned prisons are absolutely chock full of phantoms and spirits, and why wouldn't they be? The folks there are probably the most discontent and anger-filled of them all. Eastern State takes full advantage of this too. While the prison itself is no longer operational and houses no inmates, well, no living inmates, they still bring fearless folks around on night tours of the facilities. On clear nights, you can even see moonlight shining through these skylights. In addition to the ghosts of prisoners, it's also said that a colony of cats used to live inside the prison. At some point, they were all captured and neutered, leaving them to die off within the walls. An adept eye might just catch the shadow of a ghost cat slinking about in the halls. Right on. Well, have you updated your travel itinerary? Looking to get lost in some abandoned buildings? Just be careful out there, alright?
Located at the end of the Mani Peninsula in Greece, you'll find a small landmass called Cape Matapan. The caves in this area open at sea level into a cliff face beneath the headland, the exact point marked by the ruins of a Spartan temple above. The inhabitants built several temples at the site, with the most notable being in dedication to Poseidon and Apollo, for which Strabo in the 1st century AD and Pausanias in the 2nd century AD describe a cult temple that worshipped Poseidon and fronted a cave-like temple on the headland. The cave was believed to be the gateway to Hades, the realm of the dead named for the patron god of the underworld, in which the departed souls were transported across the rivers Styx and or Acheron by Charon the ferryman to be judged on whether they would reside in Elysium or Tartarus. This was one of the several entrances that the ancient Greeks ascribed to Hades, the kingdom of the shades. Others were to be found at the Necromantian of Ephyra, as well as at Alipotropa, another smaller cave network on the Mani. Here, according to the stories, is the place where Orpheus entered the underworld in search of his lost love Eurydice. When the hero Hercules passed down into the underworld, it was again through the Cape Matapan caves. These are not the only legend ascribed to the remote peninsula, however. The Spartans viewed this as a highly significant place of worship, and they built several temples to their gods along the rocky headland. Most prominent amongst the surviving ruins are the remains of a temple dedicated to the sea god Poseidon, located on a hill directly above the cave to Hades. Another story related by Pausanias linked to the picturesque cape relates to the poet Arion, who escaped from pirates to be carried ashore by a pod of dolphins. A bronze statue of the poet riding a dolphin stands on the crest of the cape, not far from the ruins of a temple raised in honor of the sea god Poseidon. The caves at Matapan can still be entered by visitors, although a boat is required to pass through the watery mouth of this particular hellgate. In at number 4, we have Acton Tunichil Muknal Cave in Belize. Uncovered in 1980, the Acton Tunichil Muknal is a mine archaeological site that includes skeletons, ceramics, and stoneware. Acton Tunichil Muknal Cave, otherwise known as the Cave of the Stone Sepulchre, was first entered by the Mayans in AD 300 to 600. It was not until the late AD 700 to 900 that the Mayans went deeper into the cave to perform their ceremonies. The cave is a maze of chambers along with a cathedral-like area for ceremonial sacrifices. In the cave, archaeologists found numerous skeletons, but what makes it even creepier is the fact that most of the skeletons belong to sacrificed people. Many of the remains and artifacts are completely calcified in the cave. cave. Almost all lost their lives to blunt trauma to the head, while most of the pottery found at the site dates from between 700 to 900 AD, which is likely when the bodies found here were sacrificed. One of the cave's most notorious features is the skeleton of a girl whose bones have been calcified into a crystallized appearance. This skeleton is known as the Crystal Maiden. It is unknown what the circumstances of the sacrifices were, though some believe they were to appease the rain god Chag, or possibly the gods of the underworld. Another theory holds that these were believed to be witches, possibly suffering from some kind of mental or physical ailments, and that leaving them unburied in the cave would ensure that their spirits were trapped there. Therefore, from the location to the remains that were found and rituals that were performed here, it's safe to assume that this might just be one of the places that the devil may be hiding. In at number 3, we have the Gates of Guinea in New Orleans. According to voodoo mythology, the newly dead are sent to a kind of purgatory before traveling to meet their ancestors in the deep waters. Known as Guinea, this realm was presided over by the notorious Loire, who goes by the name of Baron Samedi. Often depicted as a skeleton in corpse paint dressed in a top hat and tails, the Baron is a powerful symbol of death and rebirth, guarding the crossroads which form portals to other worlds. The most important of all these portals are the Gates of Guinea themselves. While some followers of voodoo interpret the 7 gates as a spiritual metaphor, others believe them to exist in the physical realm. One of these stories locates the gates in New Orleans. To enter Guinea, it is said that one must open the 7 gates in the correct order. There are tales of voodoo practitioners opening the gates of Guinea to reclaim the souls of the dead. Souls in this lost land are also considered to be at high risk from hoodoo magicians, who have the power to reanimate them as zombies. Although the exact locations of the gates have never been disclosed, there have been oblique suggestions over the years that a clue may lie in the Vevi, or summoning sigil of Baron Samedi himself. Appearing as a crucifix surmounted by 7 stars, the symbol might indeed serve as a map of sorts. Once aligned over the crossroads of Canal Street and Basin Street in the city's French Quarter, the stars of the Vevi seem to fall on notable surrounding cemeteries. Therefore, it's not too uncommon to believe that this might be the spot the devil is hiding, with all the talks of spirits, the Baron and the underworld at this location. In at number 2, we have the 7 Gates of Hell in Pennsylvania. In a quiet little backwater of York, Pennsylvania, one finds Helm Township, by all accounts a pleasant, friendly town and unremarkable, were it not be for the rumored existence of a gateway to hell in a nearby forest. One of the better known legends tied to the location is that an insane asylum on the town's outskirts, which supposedly burnt to the ground in the 19th century. 7 gates were built surrounding the remains of the asylum. At every gate, with the distance closing in, the police found more of the escaped patients, capturing them peaceably but killing any that showed aggression in violent ways. According to this particular legend, the inmates, most of them criminally insane, escaped, only to be recaptured using a series of tall fences and security gates. Many lost their lives to guards in the process. What the police and citizens didn't realize was that the construction of the gates prevented the souls of the dead from passing on to the other side, forcing them to be trapped for eternity in the remains of the asylum. Legend says the anger, hate, and violence in these souls caused a rift that allowed for hell to open, the gates preventing anything to be let out, but also preventing anything from traveling in. An alternate story tells of a doctor who once lived in the town. This man, by some accounts a Satanist, was said to have designed a series of strange gates on this land, which followed a winding path running deeper and deeper into the forest, where stories agree is that those who pass through the gates in order will find themselves transported straight to the underworld. Only the first gate is visible by daylight, situated in woodland just off Helm's Trout Run Road. Regardless of what the origin of the gates are, if you were to take a trip to the gates, you'll only find one. The rest of the gates can only be seen during the night. They exist in a realm between light and dark and can only be accessed at that time. If you were to find and pass through all 7 gates, you'll find yourself in hell, unable to escape and trapped for all of eternity. Those who have tried to look for the gates report seeing shadow figures wandering through the forest, the smell of something burning, and screams in the distance. Worst of all, some say they know of a few who have found at least 5 gates, but went off looking for the 6th, they never returned. And finally, in at number 1, we have Pluto's Gate in Turkey. Known as Pluto's Gate or Plutonian in Greek, the archaeological site in southwestern Turkey was discovered in 2013 after following the route of a thermal spring. The site matches closely the description of the temple to the underworld that disappeared in the 6th century. The most notable feature of this gate is that deadly vapor still is blown out of the gate. Additionally, this location was once used in ancient rituals to the gods of the underworld, and still claims the lives of unfortunate birds who get too close. An archaeological dig revealed the remains of an ancient temple situated on a thermal spring, long believed to have been a gateway to hell. This well-documented temple of Pluto disappeared from record sometime around the 6th century. Amongst the distinguishing features of this particular gate are the toxic fumes that waft out from the tunnels beneath. In times of antiquity, these were often inhaled by the priests of Pluto, promptly sending them into hallucinogenic trance states. Writing at some time around the year 0 AD, the Greek philosopher Strabo claimed that any animal that passes inside meets instant death. Even now, the poisonous vapors claim the lives of birds that fly or nest too close to the ruins. Only the eunuchs of Cybele, an ancient fertility goddess, were able to enter the Hellgate without any apparent damage, the report said. With the mysterious deadly vapor and ancient rituals, the gods being transformed at this location, it's not hard to believe that the devil may just be lurking deep within the temple.
In 5th place, we have the Krampnitz Eagle. Alrighty, time for the usual disclaimers because the tube that is you does not like people chatting about all things World War II, so this girlie has to be kinda goofy to get around that and get my point across. We're gonna chat about the bad guys, whose name starts with an N, but I'll be referring to them as Yahtzees. If you have an issue with that, take it up somewhere else. I've just gotta follow the interweb rules. Krampnitz in Germany was used as a cavalry training center during the First World War, and then as a motorized vehicle barracks by the bad German guys during the Second World War, housing motorbikes, tanks, and armored vehicles. When the Russians took Berlin, the Germans fled, handing themselves over to the British and US forces rather than be captured by the Red Army, who soon claimed Krampnitz as their own. Yahtzee imagery, especially with the big bad symbol, whose name starts with an S, was banned in Germany after the war, and rightfully so. I know it wasn't originally a big bad symbol, I'm quite informed on the history of it and the name and different pronunciations, but trust me, that's just the easiest way to get my point across. I think I'm doing enough dancing around words right now. I don't want to make anyone's head spin, least of all my own. Examples in public places were destroyed, and it is still illegal to display them outside of authorized exhibitions. However, at Krampnitz, this original and painstakingly crafted mosaic inlaid with gold leaf remained for decades. Some speculated the Russians may have kept it as a trophy of sorts, explaining its remarkable survival. But it remained there even after the Russians finally abandoned the site in 1992. The Krampnitz eagle appears to have been the very last genuine example of its kind. It was a haunting reminder of the reality of humanity's darkest days. It was eventually destroyed in the mid-2010s, and while I don't believe that Yahtzee stuff should be paraded about, it is kind of a shame that such intricate art has been lost to time. In 4th place, we have pickled creatures. It reminds me of right after high school, when I was helping to clean out my grandma's basement and found jars of pickled unknowns that had been pickled like before I was born. I was very grateful that none of the jars were open or broken, because who knows what they had turned into by that point. Hoarding is genetic, and I am determined to break the chain of women from that side of my family tree drowning in belongings. Alrighty, back on track for now, I promise. Blame my ADHD. Anderlecht Veterinary College in Brussels was built in 1912 in a pretty Belgian neo-Renaissance style, but left abandoned in 1991 when the whole campus moved location to the eastern Belgian town of Liège. Gosh, neo-Renaissance architecture is so stunning, don't you think? Feel free to let me know in the comments what your favorite architecture style is. It could be a fun debate. The various buildings, which once contained pens for cattle and cages for primates and other mammals, were gradually converted, but one remained empty long after the others. Upstairs was a grand lecture hall complete with rows of plush red theater-like chairs, while beautiful marble staircases and brass banisters adorned the other floors. The kind of place, you just want to marvel at and curl up in, just to imagine lives that came before yours. Down in the basement, however, lurking in a dark and long disused room, were hundreds of macabre specimens of animals preserved in glass jars. I'm talking baby pigs, cows, and even parts of dogs, cats, and horses were among them. I'm glad my research elaborated on part of, because for a moment I was trying to picture a container large enough to hold a horse, and it was kinda terrifying. Jawbones, internal organs, and some whole animals all waited to greet any unsuspecting explorer, with their glassy, faded eyes staring out through the yellowish tint of formaldehyde. Good old formaldehyde. Some were smashed and laid rotting on tables and floors, making for a truly bizarre and disturbing sight, especially down there in the darkness, and only lit by torchlight. Also, imagine the smell. Okay, moving on before I gag from my overactive imagination taking over. In 3rd place, we have a mummified body. Okay, Alexa, you can do it. You can fight the urge to hurl. Back in August of 2022, police in Milwaukee were asking for the public's help in identifying a man whose body was found in an abandoned building, and yep, you guessed it, most of the body was mummified. The remains were found on August 10th at 231 West Burleigh Street. Apparently the body was found by a YouTuber, but no clue as to who it might have been. Amy, the lead forensic investigator at the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, said the body had no identification on it. The medical examiner's office said a majority of the remains were mummified, except for the head, feet, and one hand. Because of the mummification, the medical examiner's office was able to identify tattoos on the body and submit them into a database. According to an investigation report from that examiner's office, the building was a multi-use building, with a church on the first floor and rooms upstairs, but had long been abandoned according to that report. Now, this spokesperson said the person appears to be a black male based on the features discovered in the autopsy. The body also had tattoos and 5 rings on the fingers. One of the tattoos on the left arm says King, and another on the right arm has the letters SAVA. The body had further tattoos, but they were too hard for investigators to distinguish. The man was also wearing a red allergy bracelet that was, commonly used in hospitals. According to officials, the man had on multiple layers of clothing, including athletic pants and long underwear. He was also wearing what appeared to be like 2 jackets, so lots of layers. According to the autopsy report, from what they could tell, he didn't really have any injuries, and there was no signs of drug use. Fun fact, bodies left in hot, freezing environments can typically mummify in about 2 weeks, while the process typically takes a couple of months in enclosed locations. Remains in mild environments take about 3 months. When a person dies, the countdown to decomposition begins, as digestive enzymes start breaking down cells inside the body. In most cases, enzymes need to be in an aqueous environment to work, so if the fluids are removed, decomposition slows down. During spontaneous mummification, the body loses water more rapidly than the enzyme's destructive actions can operate. Bodies buried in crypts can accidentally mummify if ventilation, is a thing. Not every part of the body mummifies at the same time though. Like some internal organs, like the heart, take a lot longer to dry out, which makes sense. Whereas the hands, toes, and scrotum are among the fastest body parts to dry out. Like I said before, the environment can speed up the process, often through extreme temperatures or pH levels that slow down the enzyme activity. Sometimes the soil surrounding the body plays a big part as well, either through osmosis or because heavy metals in the dirt can impede the enzymes. Even clothes can help mummification because they act as a wick that absorbs bodily fluids from the skin. In addition to protecting the remains from the body's process of decomposing, the environmental conditions also have to defend against external threats like bacteria, fungi, and animals in order to ensure that a mummy will last. Figured that would all be worth learning about because why not? Am I still queasy? Sure, but it was worth it. In second place, we have the haunted crane mirror. So dating back to 1833, St. Bridget's Asylum in Ireland is among the oldest surviving examples of such buildings. It first opened its doors in, 1833 as the Connaught District Lunatic Asylum and was considered one of the earliest of the Irish district asylums, hailing a new progressive role in mental health for Ireland, stating that it would care for the curable lunatics. I know that's out of date terminology, but it's a direct quote from history, not my own words. Hey, under that hospital standards, I'd fall under that category myself. Until recent history, ADHD was something people could grow out of, and that was something I was taught as a kid. I more so grew into mine, but that's not our point today. With the deinstitutionalization of mental health and the constant overcrowding, St. Bridget's Psychiatric Hospital was forced to close its doors in 2013. Designed in a prison-like radial plan from grim gray stone, by the 1920s it was grossly overcrowded. Designed originally for 840 patients, but holding almost 1,500. Sadly, this was the norm for many institutions, and not the exception. While many started off as well-meaning, and this was, all over the world, demand was just too high and the pressure to overfill was given into. So there are 5 main styles of asylum design: the corridor, pavilion, echelon, colony, but I'll elaborate more on the radial plan I mentioned for this place. The radial plan saw the long wings of the asylum radiate outwards from a central point, thus reflecting the style of prisons of that era. This style was considered inhumane even in its day, due to the lack of natural light, circulation of air, and space for airing courts. So, okay, maybe this specific asylum never had good intentions. Like all good mysteries, the crane mirror discovered in one of the rooms by urban explorers posed some intriguing questions. Standing alone in an otherwise unremarkable room, with its strange seashell motif and intricate dancing carved wooden cranes, it stood around 12 feet tall and suggested something perhaps more at home in a ballet school. But in the 19th century, and within an asylum, that explanation seemed most unlikely. Larger than any door or window in that room, I kinda wonder how they even managed to get it in there. But also, why go to such trouble? Was it some sort of strange passion project installed at the request of a former medical superintendent? Could there really have been ballet classes in an asylum, or was it part of some strange type of therapy? Perhaps it covered up like a doorway or something else hidden behind it, and if so, what? No satisfactory answer has yet been found. Explorers have mentioned that that specific room felt ice cold when they were in it, almost as if some sort of spirit had attached themselves to the area, which sounds accurate to me. While they couldn't find a death rate for the asylum, just assume it was high, and at least some poor soul passed there when they shouldn't have. I feel like I'm forgetting something. It'll come to me. Oh right, a different urban explorer found an old abandoned coffin sitting alone in the basement, which she thankfully discovered was empty. Personally, I don't think I would have dared open the thing. I'm too disgusted by what could be, and fearful of curses, but All the power to her. In first place, we have the West Park Asylum brain matter. Time to travel to another asylum, West Park Asylum, and this time to the abandoned mortuary and pathology labs, which sat nestled among the trees in a corner of the site. It had once been tucked away behind the asylum's chapel, but that was demolished back in the 1980s to make way for a staff car park, because priorities. Parking over history. Being home to up to 2,545 patients, death visited the asylum regularly, and the mortuary fridges had room for up to 12 bodies to be stored at any one time. Something about that ratio makes me think the morgue got overfilled quite a bit. One could wander these shabby abandoned wards of the asylum after closure and read the old logbooks that described patients dying in the night or after a fall or injury. Fluid and tissue samples were taken from some patients and stored in boxes or on glass slides, including chunks of brain, sealed in paraplast blocks, which is a waxy paraffin-based substance for later study. Being unmarked, no one knows who they once belonged to, what they died of, or what lessons might have been learned from them. Anything that remained would have been eventually thrown away or burned, along with all the other fascinating artifacts this crazy asylum once contained. I'm both fascinated and grossed out by this. Not sure which side is winning. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I think I'm definitely horrified. Talking about mental institutions takes a lot out of me mentally. Pun not intended.
Coming in at 5, Hashima Island, Japan. Hashima Island is an abandoned island lying about 15 kilometers from the city of Nagasaki in southern Japan. It is one of 505 uninhabited islands in Nagasaki Prefecture. The island's most notable features are its abandoned concrete buildings, undisturbed except by nature and the surrounding sea wall. While the island is a symbol of the rapid industrialization of Japan, it is also a reminder of its history as a site of forced labor prior to and during the Second World War. The island reached a peak population of 5,259 in 1959, and in 1974, with the coal reserves nearing depletion, the mine was closed and all of the residents departed soon after, leaving the island effectively abandoned for the following 3 decades. Interest in the island then re-emerged in the 2000s on account of its undisturbed historic ruins, and it gradually became a tourist attraction. The island is increasingly gaining international attention, not only generally for its modern regional heritage, but also for the undisturbed housing complex remnants representative of the period from the Taisho period to the Showa period. It has become a frequent subject of discussion among enthusiasts for ruins. Since the abandoned island has not been maintained, several buildings have collapsed mainly due to typhoon damage, and other buildings are in danger of collapse. However, some of the collapsed exterior walls have been restored with concrete. The island was formally approved as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in July 2015 as part of Japan's sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, iron and steel, shipbuilding and coal mining. In at 4, Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania. The Eastern State Penitentiary, also known as ESP, is a former prison in Philadelphia that was operational from 1829 until 1971. The penitentiary refined the revolutionary system of separate incarceration first pioneered at the Walnut Street Jail, which emphasized principles of reform rather than punishment. Notorious criminals such as Al Capone and bank robber Willie Sutton were also held inside its innovative wagon wheel design. Originally, inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by entering through a small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Only a small portal, just large enough to pass meals, opened onto the cell blocks. The design in turn proved impractical, and in the middle of construction, cells were constructed that allowed prisoners to enter and leave the cell blocks through metal doors that were covered by a heavy wood door to filter out noise. Some believe that the doors were small so prisoners would have a harder time getting out, minimizing an attack on a security guard. Others have explained the small doors forced the prisoners to bow while entering their cells. This design is related to penance and ties to the religious inspiration of the prison. The prison was one of the largest public work projects of the early Republic and was a tourist destination in the 19th century. Visitors spoke with prisoners in their cells, proving that inmates were not isolated, though the prisoners themselves were not allowed to have any visits with family or friends during their stay. The prison is now abandoned, however it operates as a museum and historic site, open year-round. However, those who have visited have noted a weird presence inside its walls, and it is said that its former inmates haven't quite left the building yet. In at number 3, Aniva Rock Lighthouse, Russia. The Aniva Lighthouse was built by the Japanese in 1939 on a chunk of rock off the southern coast of Sakhalin, just east of Russia. The island was largely uninhabited until the 1800s, when both Japan and Russia became interested in annexing it. A ring of lighthouses were built on Sakhalin's rocky coast to signal incoming troop carriers and merchant ships. After around 50 years of sharing the island, the Russians annexed it all in the Second World War, causing 500,000 Japanese to be evacuated back to Hokkaido. In 1951, the Treaty of San Francisco was signed, officially handing tenure over to the Russians. Now the Oniva Lighthouse is abandoned, including its 7 stories of diesel engines, accumulator rooms, keepers' living spaces, radio facilities, storerooms, large clockwork pendulum, and 300 kg pool of mercury. The place now looks like the perfect location for a horror movie, with the building completely deteriorating upon the rock due to the force of the water and wind. However, if you want to visit, you can. Regular tours are organized from Sakhalin's main city. During the 6-day journey, tourists can not only visit the lighthouse, but also enjoy the views of the city. Coming in at number 2, Willard Asylum, New York. The Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane is a former state hospital in Willard, New York, near Seneca Lake. The asylum was originally meant to rescue mentally ill people from county facilities where they were typically kept, often chained up or in cages. At Willard, the idea was that patients could be treated and hopefully rejoin society. In reality, Willard was more of a prison than it was a hospital, with patients being kept until the administrators decided they could leave. However, many never did. Worse still, not everyone who found themselves in the asylum were actually insane. Now, as of today, Willard is abandoned, but much of it still remains. The bowling alley built inside its walls during the later years is still standing, with several decaying pins remaining at the end of the lanes. The morgue is also still intact, with the autopsy tables in place next to the drawers where the bodies were stored. Now, in those days when a person died, it was shameful to have one's family name on the grave of a mental hospital. As such, out of respect, none of the graves were marked. Today, efforts are underway to find out who is buried in the graves and replace numbers with names. In the attic is where things have been unearthed though. In 1995, the same year the asylum closed, hundreds of suitcases were discovered in the attic. They had been left behind by the patients who never left the asylum. More than half of the 50,000 patients that came to Willard died within its walls, making this building one of the scariest in history.
Number 4, the Paris Catacombs. Deep underground the city of Paris are hundreds of miles of tunnels in a complex network that is one of the oldest in the world. It's a darker city that few tourists experience due to the high risk of danger. You know, people often get lost. The walls can also collapse at any moment, so many who venture there wear miners' helmets. There's no electricity among the endless winding canals. There's no electricity amongst the endless winding canals, corridors, and crypts filled with mounds of unidentified skulls, which are estimated to be about 6 million deceased Parisians. There are parts so tight that you have to lie on your belly and slither forward like a worm to get through. Only a small section of the catacombs is accessible to tourists, while the rest has been illegal to enter since 1955. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't explore the tourist accessible areas. Heck, I want to visit those myself, but stay out of the illegal areas. Urban explorers who frequent the catacombs call themselves cataphiles, which I must admit is a very smart moniker. They paint, sculpt, and create other art, while also building false walls, trap doors, and secret chutes to keep away the cataflics or catacops who try to catch them trespassing. You must know a cataphile who can be your guide to even try to explore the unknown, or else risk getting lost or stuck for who knows how long. As much as I love exploring creepy history, the thought of getting lost in such a cursed place is a type of scared I'm not fond of, and don't particularly ever want to experience. Number 3, the island of Poveglia. Yep, an entirely abandoned island, and it's got quite the history. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yeah, I'll backtrack and elaborate. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, so fearing the crazy spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. Go. At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires were burned once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and just jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work has started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation, so maybe this is one spot on today's list that I don't want to visit, like, ever. Number 2, Bodie State Historic Park. Formerly a genuine gold mining town located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed away in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of B-O-D-E-Y to B-O-D-Y, and then a few other phonetic variations to eventually B-O-D-I-E after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora lettered a sign as such, an accidental typo that got stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. A particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timber and explosions underground. Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives too soon in the process. When the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for the act. According to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Nowadays, if you remove anything from the land, even like a little pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past, who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. So kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 1, Plymouth. The Caribbean island of Montserrat was quite the getaway spot in the 1980s after music producer Sir George Martin opened a recording studio there called Air. The appeal of working with his team and spending a few weeks or months recording in a tropical paradise was so compelling that the world's most famous rock stars, had a good time there. We're talking like Mick Jagger, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Paul McCartney all laid down tracks. The party sadly ended abruptly when twin disasters struck the island. Beginning on the 18th of July in 1995, a series of huge eruptions at the South Friar Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash falls across a wide area of southern Montserrat, including the capital of Plymouth. On the 21st of August in 1995, tephra fell on Plymouth, necessitating an evacuation that lasted until September 3rd. Following renewed volcanic activity on the 1st of December, residents were evacuated for the second time, but were allowed back on the 1st of January. On April 3rd, it was evacuated for the third and final time. The island was divided into risk zones. During some periods, entry into Plymouth was prohibited, and at other times it was allowed during daytime only to those with a means of rapid escape. And the last time that access was legally allowed to the area during daytime was June 16th of 1997, which was right before I was born. On the 25th of June, a further massive eruption produced pyroclastic surges that killed 19 people and reached nearly to the island's airport on the eastern side of the island, which had remained open until that time. Between the 4th to the 8th of August of that year, a further series of large eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many of the buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many of the residents. The flows, lava, ash, and other volcanic rock types were mostly compact, having a density similar to that of concrete. The removal of the overburden would have required the use of explosives, bulldozers, and other resources way too expensive for all of this. It was anticipated that the soil underneath the hardened mud and lava would have been scorched and left completely non-arable by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flows. The entire south half of the island was declared an exclusion zone because of the continuing volcanic activity at the hills. So the government of the island was moved north to the town of Brady's, although Plymouth still remains the technical capital. Recently, Montserrat has has begun chaperoning driving tours into the exclusion zone, where visitors can walk through the ruins of the former capital, which now lies buried under some 20 feet of ash and stone, where the smoking volcano still pumps over 350 tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky every day. During a tour, one sees modern concrete buildings shattered by the unbelievable force of nature. Over 10 feet of ash and mud have buried so much of the city that in certain areas, only rooftops poke up from the dust. We're talking like papers and envelopes are stacked on desktop piles of work, which were made pointless by the pile of ash that fills up the floor and outside balconies. 19 people died from breaking the law and entering the exclusion zone before it was safe, by the way. The hot gas cooked their lungs, and they looked similar to mummies when they were eventually found. Yeah, big pass from me.
Coming in at 5, Abandoned Tunnel, Rochester, New York. The Rochester Industrial Rapid Transit Railway, more commonly known as the Rochester Subway, was a light rail rapid transit line in the city of Rochester, New York from 1927 to 1956. This subway was constructed in the bed of the old Erie Canal, which allowed the route to be grade separated for its entire length. The subway was designed to reduce interurban traffic on city streets and to facilitate freight interchange between the railroads. However, the final day of passenger service was on June 30th, 1956. Now, saying that, have you ever stopped to wonder what an abandoned subway tunnel would look like? Well, thanks to some urban explorers, we now know. This picture was taken by a group exploring the dark tunnels in Rochester, New York, and it gives a pretty disturbing idea about what might be down there. All we can see is the dark, bleak walls and some kind of hazmat suit hanging from the ceiling. Very chilling indeed. Coming in at number 4, Abandoned Doll Factory, Spain. I don't know about you, but I don't think many people would jump at the opportunity to explore an abandoned doll factory. A dark, derelict building with hundreds of molds and casts stacked against the barren walls, over tables and on shelves. However, thanks to one brave urban explorer, they explored the dark halls of this Spanish doll factory in Valencia. According to the photographs taken, the now deserted factory is spread out over 3 stories, with a large staircase running up the main tower. It is a creepy building with even creepier pictures. One man even took the time to warn potential visitors not to go there, citing his fears about a potential curse. I quote, "Do not enter the factory. Seriously, I took a doll's head and a box and I had to return it. Now that sight gives me a strong anxiety. There have been rituals." Now the picture itself shows a row of dolls' heads which were known as bisque dolls. They were at the peak of their popularity between 1860 and 1990 and were intended as fashion items, created to represent women and adorned with wigs made from mohair or human hair. The picture is absolutely terrifying, with some of the dolls having a blank stare while others seem as though they are frowning. Regardless of the expression, these dolls are absolutely terrifying. Coming in at number 3, Purple Garment, Belitz-Hillstatten Hospital. Built in 1898, Belitz-Hillstatten Hospital is a now disused hospital complex of approximately 60 buildings located in the district of Belitz-Hillstatten. Between the years of 1898 and 1930, the complex served as a sanatorium for lung diseases, generally housing those with then fatal conditions. During World War I, it served as a field hospital that treated the earliest casualties of new weapons such as machine guns and mustard gas. During this time, it also treated a young soldier named Adolf Hitler, who had been blinded by a British gas attack and wounded in the leg at the Battle of Somme. During World War II, the hospital went on to be used as a Nazi field hospital, treating injured soldiers. Occupied by the Russians in 1945, it served as a Soviet military hospital for the next 50 years until 1995. The complex is now derelict and is the perfect stomping ground for urban explorers, as you would expect. This is just one of many creepy pictures taken in the abandoned hospital. We don't know who the purple garment belonged to, but seeing it strung up with shoes placed under it makes it incredibly unnerving. I think I would rather not know the backstory behind this picture. Coming in at number 2, Fire Extinguishers, West Park Hospital. West Park Hospital, sometimes referred to as West Park Asylum, was a large psychiatric hospital in Epsom, Surrey. The hospital seems to have been so called because of its location to the west of the landscaped parkland formerly associated with Horton Manor. Now, although it is sometimes referred to as an asylum by urban explorers and the media, West Park was never officially termed as such, having opened as West Park Mental Hospital in 1923. During operation, the hospital catered for around 2,000 patients of mixed class. However, it was slowly run down from the mid-1990s, and by 2003, most of the hospital was closed and derelict, although some buildings, including the New Epsom and Ewell Cottage Hospital, remain in use by NHS healthcare services. Due to its derelict state, it came to be of interest to urban explorers who were drawn in by its sheer size and also the many hospital items still inside, such as beds, kitchen equipment, as well as personal items. Now, this picture from the attic of the hospital is sure to send chills down your spine. Discovered by an urban explorer, they reportedly found these fire extinguishers arranged in a pentagram form. Sure makes you wonder what was really going on in the hospital. However, in November 2010, demolition began on the former hospital buildings. As of April 2011, most of the central buildings had been cleared, with only limited number of wards, the water tower and administration building being retained for conversion to apartments.